We finally arrived at our new home, an old two-story house standing proudly on the outskirts of an Indiana town. The yard was vast, overgrown with wild grass swaying gently in the evening breeze. I stood with Jaden, Alexis, and Liam in front of the door, gazing at the house that was supposed to be a fresh start for our little family. The house had a charm of its own, with faded wooden walls and large windows reflecting the sunlight. But there was something in the air, a mix of damp earth and something I couldn't quite place, something that made the hairs on my neck stand up. As we stepped inside, the wooden floor creaked beneath our feet as if greeting our arrival. I tried to smile at the kids, hoping they wouldn't sense my unease. Jaden, my 15-year-old eldest, bolted upstairs to explore, while Alexis and Liam busied themselves carrying small boxes into the living room. That first night in the new house felt different. The air inside was heavier, as if holding secrets it didn't want to share. I lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just nerves from moving to a new place. Suddenly, a soft rustling sound came from upstairs. I held my breath, listening closely. Small footsteps, like bare feet padding slowly across the wood, echoed in the silence of the night. My heart raced, but I brushed it off, telling myself it was just the sounds of an old house settling. The next morning, I found the kitchen cabinet door wide open, though I was sure I'd closed it tightly before bed. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I must have forgotten. But deep down, an uneasy feeling began to take root, like a seed watered by fear. Alexis, my 10-year-old middle child, told me about a strange shadow she saw in her bedroom mirror. I comforted her, saying it was just her imagination. But the fear in her eyes made me wonder if it really was just a child's fantasy. Liam, my youngest at 5, started showing signs of distress. He refused to sleep alone, insisting there was something under his bed. I checked, of course, and found nothing, but the panic in his eyes kept me awake that night. The sounds never stopped. Every night, there were footsteps in the hallway, doors creaking for no reason, and sometimes a faint breathing sound as if coming from a corner of the room. I tried talking to the kids, making sure they were okay, but I could see the fear on their faces. Jaden, usually the brave one, began withdrawing. He spent hours in his room, refusing to play with his siblings. When I asked what was wrong, he just shook his head, but I could tell he was hiding something that scared him. One night, I woke up feeling like someone was watching me. I opened my eyes slowly, but the room was pitch black. There was only a suffocating silence and the sense that I wasn't alone. I turned on the light, but no one was there. Still, the feeling lingered, like a shadow clinging to the walls. Things in the house started moving. A glass I left on the kitchen table appeared in the living room. A book I was reading was suddenly opened to a page I didn't remember. I began questioning my sanity, wondering if I was forgetting things or if something was toying with us. I tried to learn about the house's history from neighbors, but they only offered awkward smiles and changed the subject. The only clue I got was a vague remark from an old woman at an antique shop who said, "Be careful with that house. It has its own story." The unease grew thicker, like fog settling over my heart. I wanted to believe it was just temporary fear, that we'd get used to the house. But every night, when the lights went out and silence took over, I felt something lurking, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I prayed it was all in my head, that this house was truly a safe place for my family. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, something I couldn't explain, something that made this house feel alive and not at all welcoming. My fear turned to panic as the strange events began targeting my children. Jaden, always strong and brave, suddenly complained of unbearable headaches. I saw him clutching his head, his face pale as if something was draining the life out of him. That night, I was jolted awake by Jaden's scream, a sound that shook the house. I raced to his room, my heart pounding. When I flung open the door, I found him sprawled on the floor, his body trembling as if electrocuted. His eyes were wide with terror, staring at something horrifying. I knelt beside him, trying to calm him, but his body suddenly lifted a few inches off the floor, as if pulled by invisible hands. I screamed, gripping his hand tightly, but the force was too strong. Seconds later, he crashed back to the floor, gasping for breath. Jaden couldn't explain what happened. He only mumbled, "Something grabbed me, Mom. Something grabbed me." I held him, fighting back tears, my heart breaking at the sight of my son so terrified. I knew this wasn't just a bad dream. Alexis, usually cheerful and full of laughter, began to change. One night, I heard an odd sound from her room, a deep, raspy whisper, nothing like a 10-year-old girl's voice. I opened the door slowly and what I saw froze my blood. Alexis sat on her bed, staring blankly at the wall. Her mouth moved, muttering words I didn't recognize in a language that sounded alien and terrifying. I called her name, but she didn't respond. The voice kept echoing like it came from another world. When she finally turned to me, her face wasn't the Alexis I knew. Her smile was wide, unnatural, and her eyes were dark, piercing into my soul. I stepped back, my hands shaking, unsure what to do. Seconds later, she collapsed and the voice vanished. The next morning, Alexis claimed she didn't remember anything. But she spoke of a tall man standing at the foot of her bed every night, watching her with empty eyes. She described his face, pale with eyes lacking pupils, just darkness. Liam, my youngest, wasn't spared either. He cried every night, insisting there were whispers in his closet. I checked it countless times, finding nothing. But Liam swore the whispers begged him to come play in a dark place. I was losing control. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, consumed by thoughts of protecting my kids. Each night, the house felt more oppressive, as if the walls were closing in, ready to swallow us whole. I tried talking to Jaden, Alexis, and Liam, hoping it would help. But every time I brought it up, they exchanged fearful glances, as if afraid speaking would make things worse. One night, I found a drawing in Alexis's sketchbook. A tall, eyeless man standing in a room full of shadows. Beneath it she'd written, "He says I'm his." I tore up the drawing, but the fear didn't leave me. Jaden started having the same nightmare every night. He spoke of a dark room beneath the house where they waited for him. I checked the basement, finding only dust and old junk. But every time I went down there, I felt watched from the darkness. I began documenting every strange event, hoping to find a pattern or explanation. But the more I wrote, the clearer it became that this wasn't logical. Something lived in this house. Something alive, something that wanted to hurt us. I knew I had to act. I couldn't pretend this was just imagination or exhaustion anymore. My children were in danger, and I had to find a way to save them before this house destroyed us. With trembling hands, I called the nearest church, hoping a pastor could shed light on the darkness engulfing our home. Pastor John, an elderly man with a kind face, agreed to come. But he didn't come alone. He brought a paranormal investigator named Clara. Clara was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce beyond the physical world. The moment she stepped into the house, her expression changed. She clutched her chest, struggling to breathe, and said, "There's something here. Something very powerful." I looked to Pastor John for reassurance, but his face was etched with worry. They asked permission to explore the house, carrying strange equipment like voice recorders and infrared cameras. I could only nod, praying they'd find answers. As Clara ascended to the upstairs, the air in the house grew heavier. I heard her footsteps stop abruptly, followed by a low murmur. When I followed, she stood in front of Jaden's room, her hands shaking. "This is it," she said. "This is the center." Clara began a ritual, chanting prayers in Latin while clutching a silver cross. Suddenly, the hallway lights flickered, and the room's temperature plummeted. I could see my breath in the air despite the warm night. Pastor John asked us to gather in the living room to pray together. But before we could start, a loud crash echoed from upstairs, like a door slamming shut. The kids screamed and I held them tightly, fighting my own fear. Clara came downstairs, her face pale. She said she sensed a deeply malevolent presence, something not just haunting the house but bound to it. She mentioned the house had a dark history, but she needed more time to uncover it. That night, Clara set up cameras around the house, hoping to capture evidence. I couldn't sleep, my heart racing at every small sound. Around midnight, I heard Clara scream from the living room. I rushed downstairs to find her slumped on the floor, clutching her head. She showed me footage from a camera in the hallway. On the screen, a dark figure moved slowly, vanishing into a wall. I covered my mouth, unable to believe my eyes. Clara said it wasn't human but a powerful entity. Pastor John began reciting holy verses, but his voice faltered. He clutched his chest, his face contorted in pain. Clara rushed to him, yelling for us to stay back. I pulled the kids to a corner, praying for this to end. Suddenly, every door in the house swung open and slammed shut, creating a deafening cacophony. Liam sobbed, Alexis gripped my hand, and Jaden stared ahead as if seeing something I couldn't. Clara tried to resume her ritual, but she staggered as if pushed by an unseen force. The cross in her hand clattered to the floor, and a low, guttural laugh echoed through the house. It wasn't human, it was something else. Pastor John recovered, but he insisted we leave the house for the night. He said the entity was too strong to confront without more preparation. I packed some clothes and took the kids to a nearby motel, hoping we'd be safe. But even at the motel, the feeling didn't fade. I sensed something watching us, like a shadow lurking at the edge of my vision. The kids couldn't sleep, and I heard Alexis whispering in her sleep, repeating the same strange words from that night. I knew we couldn't escape this. The house had marked us, and whatever was inside wouldn't let us go so easily. I had to return with Clara and Pastor John to face the horror, or we'd be haunted forever. That night, after returning from the motel, we resolved to confront whatever was in the house. Clara and Pastor John had prepared a stronger ritual, bringing holy water and sacred artifacts. But as we stepped inside, the house greeted us with an even denser darkness. A piercing scream shook the house, not human but like the anguished cries of countless souls. I raced to the kids' room, my heart nearly stopping. What I saw there would haunt me forever. Jaden and Liam lay on the floor, their bodies twisted in unnatural positions, as if their bones were being contorted by an unseen force. Alexis stood in the corner, her face stretched into a horrifying grin, her eyes pitch black, like a starless night. I screamed their names but got no response. Jaden began thrashing, his body dragged toward a dark corner, as if pulled by invisible hands. I lunged, grabbing his hand, but the force was too strong. Clara and Pastor John burst in, armed with a cross and holy water. Clara chanted prayers loudly, but the house seemed to fight back. The walls trembled and a bone-chilling laugh echoed, making my ears feel like they'd burst. Alexis suddenly spoke, but it wasn't her voice. "You can't banish me," it said, deep and dripping with hatred. I sobbed, begging the entity to release my daughter, but it only laughed, relishing my pain. Pastor John splashed holy water toward Alexis, and she let out a shriek so piercing we all covered our ears. Her body collapsed, her eyes returning to normal, but she was unconscious, her breathing faint. The ritual continued, each step a battle against an unimaginable force. Clara's nose began to bleed, but she pressed on. She said the entity had been bound to the house for decades, and we had to break that bond. Suddenly, all the lights went out, plunging us into total darkness. I heard heavy, rapid footsteps circling us, like countless creatures scurrying around. Liam sobbed, and I held him tightly, praying we'd survive. Clara lit a candle, its glow illuminating the room. On the walls, shadows moved, tall, faceless figures. I screamed, but Clara urged me to stay calm, saying our fear only made them stronger. The ritual finally ended, and the house seemed to scream one last time. The walls stopped shaking and the air felt lighter. Alexis and Jaden began to stir, though weak. I hugged them, crying with relief, thinking we were finally free. But the relief didn't last. After moving to a new house, strange things started again. Objects moved on their own, whispers echoed at night, and the kids began dreaming of the old house. I realized we hadn't truly escaped. I contacted Clara, who said the entity might have followed us, bound to our family, not just the house. She suggested another ritual, but I was too exhausted, too terrified. I just wanted my kids safe. The old house now stands empty, abandoned by us. But locals say screams still echo at night, and some claim to see dark figures in the windows. The house seems alive, waiting for its next victims. I don't know if we'll ever be truly free. The entity still lurks, following us wherever we go. That house, the house of 1,000 screams, has become part of our lives, a curse without end. Every night, I pray we can endure, even as the darkness waits in the shadows. If you love this chilling tale, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe and ring the bell, so you never miss our dark, spine-tingling horror stories from every corner of the globe.